The humid air hung heavy over Roble Airfield that morning. September heat pressed down on New Britain like a wet blanket. Inside the operations tent, one man studied papers that would change everything. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai lifted his head from the intelligence documents. His remaining eye moved across words that seemed almost comical. The Americans had built another fighter. This one looked more like a freight train than an aircraft. They were calling it the Hellcat. Sakai couldn't help but smile. His other eye, destroyed by American gunners 12 months earlier, was a constant reminder of what happened when you underestimated the enemy. But this report seemed different. This seemed like desperation. The specifications read like a joke. Weight nearly double that of the Zero. Wings broad enough to land a transport on. Everything about it violated basic fighter design principles. Through the tent opening, morning light caught the sleek profiles of his squadron's aircraft. Row after row of Mitsubishi A6M Zeros sat ready on the pierced steel runway. These machines had ruled Pacific skies for 2 years running. British Hurricanes had fallen. American P-40s had burned. Dutch Brewster Buffaloes had tumbled into the sea. All had tried to match the Zero's deadly combination of range, speed, and maneuverability. All had failed spectacularly. This latest American attempt looked even more hopeless than the others. A fighter built like a bomber. An aircraft that seemed to carry everything except the ability to actually fight. What none of them knew in that sweltering tent was simple. 30 days from that morning, their world would begin ending. The bloated, heavy, seemingly impossible F6F Hellcat would start dismantling Japanese naval aviation piece by piece. The numbers would tell a story of complete domination. Kill ratios of 19-1. Over 5,000 enemy aircraft destroyed. Only 270 lost in return. Within 6 months, pilots now laughing at intelligence reports would be writing final letters. They would face a statistical certainty. Meeting Hellcats meant death. The foundation of Japanese air superiority rested on mathematics that seemed unshakable. Since Pearl Harbor's surprise attack, Imperial naval aviators had achieved victory margins beyond belief. 29 aircraft lost at Pearl Harbor, 347 American planes destroyed. The ratio spoke for itself. Philippines operations cost 7 Japanese aircraft. 103 American planes eliminated. Darwin raids claimed 2 Japanese losses. 30 Allied aircraft shot down. The British Far East Fleet's air arm ceased to exist. Dutch East Indies air forces vanished within days. At the center of this destruction flew 1 aircraft. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero had rewritten fighter combat rules. American engineers testing captured examples in 1942 initially refused to accept the performance data. Range-matching heavy bombers, maneuverability exceeding biplanes, firepower destroying anything it encountered. The combination seemed impossible. Warrant Officer Hiroyoshi Nishizawa would become Japan's leading ace. 87 confirmed victories credited to his name. His recovered diary described flying the Zero in terms approaching poetry. The aircraft responds to pure thought, he wrote. Control inputs become unnecessary. American fighters fly like delivery trucks, powerful but clumsy. They build machines like they build automobiles, heavy, overbuilt, wasteful. Revolutionary design philosophy created the Zero's miraculous capabilities. Super duralumin construction used classified aluminum alloys. Structural weight dropped 30% below comparable American designs. Armor plating was eliminated entirely. Self-sealing fuel tanks added unwanted pounds. Radio equipment often removed to save 30 more pounds. every ounce sacrificed for performance advantage. Swedish intelligence sources brought the first Hellcat reports to Japanese attention in early 1943. The specifications seemed like Allied propaganda, perhaps deliberate misinformation designed to confuse Japanese planning. Loaded weight exceeded 12,000 pounds. Zero fighters weighed 5,800. Wing area spanned 334 square feet. A massive radial engine created enormous drag. Ammunition load reached 2,400 rounds. Armor plating protected everything. Bulletproof glass surrounded the cockpit. Self-sealing tanks held 250 gallons of fuel. Captain Minoru Genda reviewed these specifications at Combined Fleet Headquarters. The tactical genius who had planned Pearl Harbor's attack found them laughable. His analysis, preserved in Japanese defense archives, dismissed American efforts completely. They have learned absolutely nothing, Genda concluded. This Hellcat continues their failed philosophy, attempting to overcome pilot skill with mechanical weight. Any Zero will fly circles around it. Mathematics supported his assessment perfectly. Zero wing loading of 22 pounds per square foot created turning radius of 612 feet. Hellcat wing loading of 36.5 pounds per square foot suggested turning radius exceeding 900 feet. Turning fights formed the basis of all Japanese fighter tactics. In such combat, the Hellcat would be completely helpless. Marcus Island's morning patrol would change everything. September 30th, 1943. Petty Officer First Class Yoshio Fukui flew escort for a reconnaissance mission. 6 dark blue shapes appeared climbing from the southeast. His initial thought seemed reasonable. B-25 bombers on unusual heading. Then they turned and revealed their true nature: single engines, massive fuselages, wings appearing too short for the bodies they supported. First encounter with F6F type fighter, Fukui would write later. Initial impressions suggested Americans had mounted fighter guns on torpedo bombers. Standard engagement tactics seemed appropriate. Standard tactics meant exploiting the Zero's superior turning ability, rolling into diving turns that would position him behind enemy aircraft. Heavy American fighters should continue straight flight, allowing perfect tail position shots. Something unprecedented occurred instead. The Hellcat refused to run. It didn't attempt turning with the Zero. It went straight up. The Pratt Whitney R2800 double wasp engine generated 2,000 horsepower, 700 more than the Zero's Nakajima Sakai engine. Rate of climb reached 3,500 feet per minute. Fukui tried following and watched his airspeed dissolve. At 15,000 feet, the Hellcat performed impossible maneuvers for its weight. A hammerhead turn that dropped it directly behind Fukui's aircraft. The American opened fire at 400 meters distance, 6 machine guns instead of the expected 4. Volume of fire exceeded anything previously experienced. Fukui's aircraft absorbed 17 hits in 3 seconds. Only spinning into a dive saved his life. He barely made Marcus Island with his Zero resembling Swiss cheese. His wingman, Petty Officer Second Class Masasato, never returned. The reconnaissance aircraft they were protecting also disappeared. First blood belonged to the Hellcat. Wake Island became the next testing ground. October 5th, 1943. Task Force 14 launched another strike. Lieutenant Yoshio Shiga led 12 Zeros from the 253rd Air Group to intercept what appeared routine harassment. American carriers had been conducting these hit-and-run attacks for months, usually fleeing before Japanese fighters could engage decisively. This engagement would prove different. Climbing to 20,000 feet, Shiga spotted 12 F6F fighters below in 3 neat divisions. Every advantage belonged to the Zeros. Altitude, position, surprise. Victory seemed mathematically certain. The battle that followed destroyed Japanese tactical understanding completely. Diving Zeros expected American fighters to scatter or attempt turning combat. Instead, Hellcats maintained perfect formation, accelerating into gentle dives that preserved their energy. Zero pilots opened fire at maximum range, hoping for lucky hits. Hellcats simply absorbed the punishment. Hellcat armor included 212 pounds of plate-protecting pilots, 110 pounds around oil systems, self-sealing tanks capable of surviving dozens of hits. Zeros exhausted ammunition in diving passes, while Hellcats prepared their counterattack. Instead of dogfighting, they converted weight into weapon, climbing at full power to altitudes where Zero engines struggled for oxygen. At 25,000 feet, Hellcats still produced 1,650 horsepower. Zeros dropped to 900. They descended like hawks attacking sparrows, Shiga recorded. Their weight provided speed we couldn't match. They would dive, fire those 6 terrible guns, then climb away before reaction was possible. 8 Zeros were destroyed. Not one Hellcat was lost. Rabal's assembled pilots of the 204th Air Group received sobering briefings from Lieutenant Commander Takeo Tanamizu. November 11, 1943. With 32 victories, Tanamizu was among the few pilots surviving multiple Hellcat encounters. "Forget everything about air combat," he told them. "Americans have changed all rules. They no longer fight our fight. They fight like executioners, not warriors." Tanamizu explained what Japanese pilots were learning at fatal cost. Hellcats weren't designed to outturn Zeros. They were designed to never need such capability. Energy fighting doctrine maintained speed and altitude constantly, converting potential energy to kinetic energy in slashing attacks. Zero pilots never got chances to use superior maneuverability. "They work in pairs," Tanamizu continued. "One high, one low. While you engage one, the other dives on you. Those radios we mocked for adding weight let them coordinate perfectly. We fly as individual samurai. They fight as machines." Commander Mitsuo Fuchida inspected damaged Zeros returning from Hellcat encounters at Truk Lagoon. December 1943. The Pearl Harbor attack leader now served as Combined Fleet Air Operations Officer. His examination revealed growing technology gaps. Firepower disparity was mathematical. Hellcat 6 Browning M2 machine guns fired 750 rounds per minute each. 4,500 rounds per minute total. Each 50 caliber bullet weighed 46 grams and traveled at 2,900 feet per second, delivering 3,500 foot-pounds of energy. 0-2 7.7 millimeter machine guns fired projectiles weighing 11 grams at 2,300 feet per second. 750 foot-pounds of energy. More disturbing were reports of American radar-guided fighter direction. Japanese pilots still relied on eyesight for spotting enemies. Hellcat pilots received guidance from shipboard radar controllers, seeing Japanese aircraft from 50 miles away. Lieutenant Sadamu Komachi described his first radar-directed interception. "Climbing through clouds when they hit us. No warning, no visual contact. Hellcats diving from above exactly on our heading. Perfectly positioned. They knew our location, altitude, course. We were blind men fighting those who could see in darkness." January 1944 revealed the Japanese pilot crisis reaching catastrophic proportions. Pre-war Imperial Navy pilot training had been the world's most demanding. 3 years of training. Pilots entering combat with 700 flight hours. Army pilots received 500 hours minimum. They were aerial combat artists, trained in aerobatics, gunnery, and spiritual philosophy of airfighting. By early 1944, Japanese naval pilots entered combat with 300 hours flight time. Army pilots with 200. Fuel shortages meant most training occurred in gliders. Gunnery practice was limited to 50 rounds per pilot. Formation flying, instrument procedures, radio operations all eliminated to rush pilots forward. Meanwhile, American pilots arrived with 300 hours minimum, including 50 hours in type. They had fired thousands of practice rounds, practiced carrier landings until automatic, learned energy tactics in safety over Texas airfields. Lieutenant Commander Yoshihiro Hashimoto, training officer at Kasumigara Naval Air Station, wrote in his final report, devastating truth. We are sending children to fight professionals. Yesterday, Ensign Yamamoto arrived at the front. He had never fired his guns in flight. We have no ammunition for practice. He had never flown at night. We have no fuel for such training. He lasted 7 minutes in his first combat. The Battle of Formosa became a revelation of Japanese weakness. October 12 to 16, 1944. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudomi, commanding the 2nd Air Fleet, committed everything to stop American carrier raids on Formosa. Over 700 aircraft launched, including the last trained pilots from homeland squadrons. Japanese claims reported spectacular victory. 26 carriers and battleships sunk. 300 aircraft destroyed. Reality discovered after pilots returned and gun camera footage was developed showed catastrophic defeat. Actual American losses: 89 aircraft. Japanese losses: 329 aircraft and nearly every experienced pilot. Lieutenant Sadaki Akamatsu, among the few surviving veterans, described the slaughter in his memoirs. Hellcats were waiting at every altitude. As we climbed, they were above us. As we dove, they were below. They had divided sky into grids, each section covered by a division. It was not combat. It was systematic extermination. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot would become legendary. June 19, 1944. Philippine Sea. The Japanese Navy committed its reconstituted carrier force to Operation A-Go, the decisive battle that would destroy American carrier power in the Pacific. 9 carriers, 450 aircraft, their best remaining pilots. Against them, Task Force 58 with 15 carriers and 956 aircraft. 450 of them F6F Hellcats. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa launched strikes in 4 waves, confident that Japanese pilot skill and zero range advantage would prevail. The first wave of 69 aircraft launched at 08:30. American radar detected them at 150 miles distance. Hellcats were vectored for interception with perfect positioning. Altitude advantage. Sun at their backs. Approaching from Japanese blind spots. Lieutenant Zenji Abe, leading fighter escort, saw the Hellcats minutes before engagement. They were stacked from 20,000 to 30,000 feet. At least 60 of them waiting like steel curtains. We were at 18,000 feet. Every advantage was theirs. The engagement lasted 12 minutes. Of 69 Japanese aircraft, 42 were shot down. Commander David McCampbell, CAG of Air Group 15, shot down 7 aircraft that single day. His wingman, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, got 6. The Zeros tried to turn with us. McCampbell reported, "We simply refused. We'd make high-side runs, shoot one down, zoom, climb back to altitude. They'd try following, stall out, and another Hellcat would pick them off." By day's end, Japanese losses reached 346 carrier aircraft, plus 50 land-based aircraft. American losses: 30 aircraft from all causes. American pilots in their ready rooms that evening coined the term turkey shoot. Enemy aircraft had been as helpless as game birds. Commander David McCampbell would set his single-mission record during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. October 24, 1944. Leading 7 Hellcats from Essex, he intercepted a force of 60 Japanese aircraft heading for the American fleet. The ensuing 90-minute battle saw McCampbell shoot down 9 aircraft, 5 Zeros and 4 bombers. His wingman Roy Rushing destroyed 6 more. Running out of ammunition after the 9th kill, McCampbell recorded, "The Hellcats performed flawlessly throughout. Not a single hit on my aircraft despite being outnumbered 8-1. This engagement demonstrated complete reversal of air superiority. 7 Hellcats had routed 60 Japanese aircraft, destroying 15 without loss." McCampbell's 2 ace-in-a-day performances earned him the Medal of Honor and Navy Cross. 7 kills on June 19th and 9 on October 24th. The aftermath of Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf battles produced what Japanese military psychologists later termed Hellcat psychosis among surviving pilots. Admiral Ozawa, in his after-action report, wrote, "The enemy's radar-guided fighter direction achieved something we thought impossible: the industrialization of air combat. Each Hellcat was not an individual fighter, but a component in a vast machine. Our pilots, no matter how skilled, were engaging not planes, but a system." Pilot shortage became so acute that by early 1945, training was reduced to 40 hours for Navy pilots, 60 hours for Army pilots. Kamikaze pilots received only 40 hours total, approximately 7 days of training. Operation Iceberg at Okinawa saw the Japanese launch 1,900 kamikaze sorties against the American fleet. April to June 1945. The Hellcat became not just a fighter, but a defender against desperate suicide attacks. Lieutenant Eugene Valencia, leading his flying circus division of Hellcats, shot down 23 Japanese aircraft during the campaign. His tactical innovations using divisions of 4 aircraft in coordinated attacks made traditional Japanese tactics suicidal. "We developed what we called the mowing machine," Valencia explained. 4 Hellcats in line abreast, separated by 100 yards, would sweep through Japanese formations at high speed. Each pilot covered his sector. We'd make one pass, climb back to altitude, and repeat. Okinawa campaign mathematics were stark. Hellcats flew 38,038 combat sorties, claiming 2,351 victories against 249 losses, a 9.5-to-1 ratio. More significantly, they prevented approximately 80% of kamikaze aircraft from reaching their targets. By 1945, the technology gap had become unbridgeable. The F6F Hellcat incorporated improvements making it even deadlier. Water injection boosted power to 2,200 horsepower. Zero-length rocket launchers were added. Improved armor and the K-14 computing gun sight calculated deflection automatically. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, Japan's legendary ace with 28 official victories, though modern historians estimate closer to 15, encountered Hellcats for the first time in June 1944. Despite his skill and experience, he was nearly killed in his first engagement. "I performed my best aerobatics," he wrote in his autobiography. "Loops, rolls, split S, every maneuver perfected over 200 combats. The Hellcat followed easily, almost casually. I survived only because the American pilot made an error. He forgot to release his drop tank before combat. By war's end, the F6F Hellcat had destroyed 5,223 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, while losing only 270 aircraft to enemy fighters. achieved a 19.3 to 1 kill ratio, produced 305 U.S. Navy aces, accounted for 75% of all Navy air-to-air victories. The human cost for Japan was catastrophic. Of 18,000 naval aviators who had started the war, fewer than 100 combat-experienced pilots remained by August 1945. The transformation of Japanese naval aviation from elite force to kamikaze operations represented ultimate admission of Hellcat superiority. Unable to compete conventionally, Japan turned its pilots into guided missiles. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, father of the kamikaze program, justified it with stark mathematics. If a Zero attacks a carrier conventionally, probability of success is near zero. The Hellcats will destroy it. If the Zero becomes a bomb, probability of hitting increases to 30%. The pilot dies either way. At least as a kamikaze, his death has meaning. October 25, 1944, Hiroyoshi Nishizawa escorted the first official kamikaze mission led by Lieutenant Yukio Seki. He claimed his 86th and 87th victories against F6F Hellcats in the process. The next day, October 26, 1944, Nishizawa died as a passenger aboard a transport shot down by Hellcats from VF-14. Japan's greatest ace, helpless without a fighter, fell to the very aircraft he had briefly bested. Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast reached Atsugi Airfield on August 15, 1945. Captain Minoru Genda, who had dismissed Hellcats as weight over finesse, listened to the emperor's words. Around him sat the remnants of Japanese naval aviation. Teenage pilots with 40 hours flight time. Aircraft cobbled together from spare parts, empty fuel tanks. That same day, Ensign Clarence Moore of VF-31, flying from USS Belleau Wood, shot down a Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber after 2 p.m., the last aerial victory of World War II. The Japanese pilot, apparently unaware of surrender, was approaching the American fleet when Moore intercepted him. 2 short bursts from the Hellcat's 6 guns ended the Pacific Air War. September 1945, Atsugi Airfield. The first American aircraft to land after surrender were 12 F6F Hellcats from USS Yorktown. Japanese pilots, mechanics, and ground crews lined the runway to see their tormentor up close. American pilot Lieutenant Robert Vratziu, ace with 19 victories, demonstrated Hellcat capabilities to Japanese pilots. His casual aerobatics, loops, rolls, and climbs that would have torn a Zero apart left them speechless. "You have to understand," Vratziu told them through an interpreter, "this isn't even pushing it. In combat with water injection, it's 20% more powerful. The plane is stressed for 13 Gs. I've never managed to break one." Japanese engineers studying captured Hellcats after the war discovered the true extent of American industrial superiority. The Pratt Whitney R2800 engine contained 284 precision-machined parts, each interchangeable with any other R2800 engine. The Nakajima Sakai required hand-fitting of components. No 2 engines were exactly alike. Professor Jiro Horikoshi, designer of the Zero, studied the Hellcat extensively after the war. His conclusion was devastating. "We designed an aircraft for 1941. They designed an aircraft system for 1945. While we were perfecting the sword, they were building the industrial age." Grumman's production of the Hellcat itself became a weapon. The Bethpage, New York factory operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At peak production, a new Hellcat rolled off the assembly line every 60 minutes. The company produced 12,275 Hellcats in 30 months, a feat the Japanese couldn't comprehend. In 1944, Japan produced 5,100 fighters of all types. America produced 35,000 fighters that year alone. The production system included innovations seeming impossible to Japanese observers. Workers using color-coded instructions to assemble complex components. Shifts operating around the clock. Quality maintained despite speed. The Hellcat didn't just win battles. It revolutionized naval warfare. Pre-war doctrine assumed carriers were vulnerable platforms needing to strike first to survive. The Hellcat inverted this completely. Carriers became fortresses that could absorb and repel any air attack. Admiral Mark Mitcher, commander of Task Force 58, understood this transformation. With the Hellcat, we don't need to find them first. Let them come. The F6F will destroy them at our convenience. This confidence allowed unprecedented offensive operations. American carriers could park off enemy coastlines for weeks. Their Hellcat umbrellas made them essentially invulnerable to air attack. Beyond technology, the Hellcat represented cultural philosophy that invalidated Japanese military doctrine. The samurai tradition emphasized individual excellence, spiritual strength, and acceptance of death. The Hellcat embodied systematic efficiency, material superiority, and preservation of life. This philosophical gulf meant Japanese pilots couldn't adapt to Hellcat tactics, even when they understood them. The concept of refusing combat when disadvantaged, fundamental to Hellcat doctrine, was literally unthinkable to Japanese pilots trained in Bushido. In 1962, the United States Navy held a symposium on Pacific War aviation. American and Japanese veterans gathered to discuss the conflict with historical perspective. Captain David McCampbell, the Navy's ace of aces with 34 victories, stated simply, "The Hellcat won the Pacific Air War, period. It destroyed Japanese aviation and made our victory inevitable." Commander Saburo Sakai responded, "The Zero was a superior fighter. The Hellcat was a superior weapon system. We never understood the difference until too late. We brought swords to a gunfight and wondered why we lost." The Hellcat's dominance can be reduced to simple mathematics that tell a profound story. Kill ratio, 19-1 overall, 13-1 specifically against Zeros. Hellcats produced 12,275 in 30 months. Zeros produced 1943 to 1945, approximately 6,000. American pilots trained on Hellcats, over 5,000. Japanese pilots remaining by August 1945, fewer than 100 combat-capable. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, who had commanded the Japanese fleet at Philippine Sea, provided perhaps the most honest assessment. "We laughed at the Hellcat because we didn't understand it represented not just an aircraft, but an entire civilization's approach to war." By the time we stopped laughing, our air forces had ceased to exist. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai lived until 2000. In his final interview, he was asked about the Hellcat. His response captured the totality of its dominance. The Zero made Japan a great naval power. The Hellcat made Japan realize it was never as great as it believed. We thought we were samurai. The Hellcats showed us we were just men with outdated weapons facing the future. Every Japanese pilot who survived the war survived because a Hellcat pilot chose to let them live. That is the ultimate defeat. Existing at your enemy's discretion. The F6F Hellcat entered service weighing twice what the Zero weighed. Carrying armor the Zero didn't have. Powered by an engine the Japanese couldn't build. Armed with weapons they couldn't match. Guided by radars they couldn't detect. Flown by pilots they couldn't equal in training. Produced in numbers they couldn't comprehend. Japanese pilots had laughed at it because they didn't understand that every extra pound represented not weakness, but the strength of an industrial democracy that could afford to protect its warriors. By the time they understood, their laughter had turned to last letters home, their mockery to kamikaze missions, their confidence to complete collapse. The Hellcat hadn't just defeated the Zeros, it had destroyed an entire philosophy of warfare, proving that in modern combat, the nation that could build the better system would destroy the nation that could only build better warriors. The Japanese pilots had laughed at the F6F Hellcat. The Hellcat had the last laugh. It always did.